VFX is highly volatile as a business, but it's equally challenging in the art of it, because it's not just learning or just training that helps us, but it's experience that is most critical. So visual effects has been around for a fairly long time in India, but the cutting edge work and the higher end work has only been happening since the last few years, and yet there's that much more that India has not really done yet. So where the international artists, the freshers who join internationally in any of our facilities, they get the opportunity of working on Avatar as their first project or a Tron as their second project. In India, those opportunities have not existed, which means that it's not about artists are better or not better. It's just about being able to train them in the right way, giving them that perspective, that that eye for detail is required, which comes with experience, with time. And that is our initiative, to be able to take that level higher and higher in our artists and make them better. So it is a matter of time before the Indian artists can start doing that. We're already doing projects which are completely done out of India, or the Indian artist is getting that opportunity. But at the same time, we're also focusing on developing fresher talent. So for example, in the 2D to 3D conversion side, I only take in freshers. We train our freshers from scratch. People who joined me about 4 years back when we started, in 2 years' time were leads or supervisors, or today are actually focusing on leading and supervising complete projects. And that's a huge step up for these people, because in age they might be very young, because they are sometimes only 25 or 24, but in just their experience of managing and dealing with these projects, they have matured and evolved quite a lot. Visual effects, it is very different from that. It's dependent on experience, but the artists are developing quite fast, and it's as soon as they get this opportunity, and the hunger in them is so much that they are willing to put in their best to make it happen. Stereo conversion, when it started, there were a lot of purists who said you need to shoot 3D. If you want to do 3D, shoot 3D. So when conversion started, when 3D came on the on the scene, the technology was still developing for cameras also, as well as conversion. So there were a few things that yes, you could shoot it and maybe the result was a little better, or it was faster. Once you just shot it, you had the result and you didn't have to work on it in post. However, when you shoot in 3D, you need to shoot it, you need to check it on location. If it's not okay, you shoot it again, or you have to depend on another person, a stereographer, to actually guide you through the process, which is also great. But it's a time-consuming process, which sometimes some directors have that ability or the patience to deal with, and some don't. Once you shoot in 3D, you are stuck with 3D throughout your post-production process, which means projects which are heavy in visual effects may require everything in visual effects to be then done in a stereo pipeline, which increases cost, which increases time, and with both of those shrinking constantly, there was a solution required. Coming to conversion, what's the best part about conversion is that you can shoot your project as you would normally shoot film. The director is not keeping that in mind. He's already sort of under the burden of budgets, he's under the burden of directing his stars, at the same time making sure that the light is not fading out. Now on top of that, you have visual effects that is also requiring its own time on location. So now if you add in the stereo part of it, that's just way too much. But what if you could actually do it as you shoot it normally, and then come up to a post-production suite or come into a studio environment where you can actually watch your shots, look at it and say, you know what if I could just on these particular shots increase the depth? What if I could just time it in such a way that at the right point the 3D kicks in and then the depth goes out again over the rest of the sequence? Those are the kind of things that you can make a decision on in hindsight, not during the shoot, because when you're shooting, you have to be moving forward. You have to be able to focus on the sequence and the shot and make sure that it's either that's what you get and that's what is now on the shot. But with conversion, you can actually be in a studio and make some of those decisions in a little more controlled environment, watch your edit in a flow, and then decide whether the shot works or doesn't work, or if there's something more or less that you want to do with it. And these are some of the benefits of doing conversion. There are projects that we do where there is a fine balance between stuff that is shot and converted. So there is a benefit, and there is a sort of a going together of a hybrid projects where we see some part of the project, which is just the regular narrative, is shot in stereo and the rest of it is converted. So there is the bigger films that follow that process where they strike a balance. But this summer has proven conversion really works, because most, if not all, the big projects, the really tentpole projects that were released in this summer of 2014 were all converted, right from the Spider-Mans to Transformers, World War Z to even Edge of Tomorrow. Just the scale at which they operate, it would be really difficult to actually work in a stereo pipeline throughout those kind of projects, because the visual effects in that are just fantastic and they are huge, and they need the time and space to deliver their product, and there's just no time to be able to do all of that in stereo. Visual effects as an overall thing, it needs to be looked at in a much broader bird's eye view of evolution. In 1976, when Star Wars was being done, that was the new breakthrough for visual effects. It was a new level, it was a new beginning of visual effects, a whole different way of taking the world out of special effects and now making it visual effects, where stuff was not as much in camera. Yes, though Star Wars had a lot of miniatures and a lot of stuff that was done in camera, but still it was the new digital age where ILM was bringing it out. To then going into doing Jurassic Park, to then doing, you know, all the films that Hollywood was doing. Meanwhile, in India, somewhere from doing special effects in movies in India was there, but it didn't really transform a lot. So the transformations happened in the last, maybe 6-8 years, where we started seeing more visual effects. So I still remember one of the biggest projects that we did. One of the first biggest projects that we did was Sajid Nadiadwala's Mujhse Shaadi Karogi, which was a David Dhawan directed project. Being the kind of film it was a comedy. It was fantastic chemistry between Salman and Akshay. And that was the focus of the film. It was not a superhero film. It was not a visual effects or a very strong action film. But the kind of visual effects that were done at that time for that project was very unique for the genre of the film that it was. It had the first time use of time slice in a feature film, where we had Salman kicking, flying through the air and kicking, and the camera was bullet time going around. The very first time that we used a motion control camera, a motion control rig in a feature film. That was something, the technology was brought in by Prime Focus, not knowing how exactly we would use it, but we wanted to break the ground, new ground. We wanted to do something new, and that's where we got those technologies in. We created our own rig and our own firing mechanism to be able to do the time slice. So those were things that were done for a film that would not normally have that kind of stuff, but it was great that we did that. And then from there on, we had any one of the other films like 2050 or Savaria, or as a matter of fact, coming down to even a Kick today, which is an action film, which does not have as much emphasis on visual effects, which are loud and in your face, but more subtle, more narrative dependent visual effects, where visual effects is not supposed to pop out but be supportive to the narrative. So it's evolving. There's a lot more planning that's going into visual effects today, from being a time where we would get a call that, okay, we've shot something and here's the stuff, just execute this, to a point where now we're getting into the script level discussion. We're doing this debates on what's the right approach for a project, or how do we execute a certain thing. The seat at the table is now there for a visual effects supervisor to to interact with the director, with the production, with the art director to see what more can we do to collaborate. There are projects that we are doing today where we are engaging on, how much of the set needs to be really constructed and how much of it we can do as visual effects. So the dependency on visual effects is definitely growing. So I see a huge breakthrough for this year where we're going to see some big movies use visual effects at a very different scale. And going ahead, I think it's going to be fantastic. For VFX in India to be a global force, it requires more focus from maybe even the government to help us make it a little bit, from the government to actually support the industry. A few years back, it wasn't even an industry, because if there were 150 artists that I had, and a couple of other companies also had equal number of artists, all put together, there's still maybe 1,000, 2,000 artists, and that's really not even an industry. So there was very little interest from the government side, or we've not seen those benefits. But today, with Prime Focus alone having more than 3,000 artists of different levels in India, I think it's time for some recognition from the government to be able to support it. For support for training has to be brought in, because it's all about training, because we can wait for another 20 years for the artist to develop, but that will not happen unless there is focused training to make it happen much more faster. And we've already seen the benefits of that. We've already seen that with our training curriculum, we're looking at training in a very different way. We're not just looking at functional training, but an overall development of artists to be able to take on these kind of roles. So challenges that we face today, yes, is financial benefits or support from the government. Training and education as an overall in the industry needs to improve. So for all the latest updates on animation, gaming and visual effects and Prime Focus, log on to animationexpress.com.